He's going to see a united front that I haven't seen in a long time, where Republicans and Democrats working with the administration are kind of come down on him like a ton of bricks, Iranian-type sanctions, and he deserves it.
We have Fox team coverage for you this morning. John Roberts is live at the White House, but we begin with Steve Harrigan, who is on the ground in northeastern Syria. Steve, hello.
Sandra, hello. Events are moving fast here, and they've changed dramatically just overnight. The Kurdish fighters, who feel they have been let down, stabbed in the back by the United States, have now turned to Bashar al-Assad, the leader of the Syrian government, which is, of course, backed by Russia, for help. So now what started out less than a week ago as a military operation by Turkey, they called it against terrorists. Now it is getting much wider, much bigger, possibly a war between two nations, Syria and Turkey, one a member of NATO, the other backed by Russia. We are seeing some brutal fighting on the ground by irregular forces, militia backed by Turkey, being accused of executing Kurdish soldiers in the field, being accused of executing a Kurdish female political leader, pulling her out of her car and shooting her in the head, and also of bombing a convoy which contained not just gunmen, but a number of journalists as well, killing 9 in that convoy. As far as the position of U.S. forces go, that small contingent has been pulled out of northern Syria. The Secretary of Defense saying he didn't want U.S. forces to get caught between two warring armies. People, too, are on the move. The number's gone up every day. Now more than 130,000 people trying to flee the growing violence. Sandra, back to you.
Steve Harrigan in northeastern Syria for us. Steve, thank you.
Meanwhile, from the White House, President Trump signaling that, quote, big sanctions are coming after the Turkish military invaded northern Syria, targeting the Kurds. The president not giving details, but suggesting there is consensus in Washington about doing so. Let's get to the White House. Start a brand new week there with John Roberts and figure out where we are today. John, hello. Good morning.
Bill, good morning to you. We may find out more about that later on today. Meantime, the president continues to defend his decision to pull U.S. forces away from the border between Syria and Turkey, again going to the well about how the United States cannot continue to fight and be involved in endless wars. The president tweeting this morning, quote, the same people who got us into the Middle East mess are the people who most want to stay there. One of the biggest concerns about Turkey fighting the Kurds is whether thousands of ISIS fighters being guarded by the Kurds will be released. The president seems sanguine about that and suggesting that any reports of ISIS fighters being released may simply be a ploy by the Kurds to try to draw the United States back into the fight. The president tweeting, Kurds may be releasing some to get us involved. Easily recaptured by Turkey or European nations from where many came, but they should move quickly. Big sanctions on Turkey coming. Do people really think we should go to war with NATO member Turkey? Never-ending wars will end. Last week, the president authorized the Treasury Secretary to impose harsh sanctions on Turkey to cripple its economy if Erdogan doesn't play ball with the administration. Earlier today, Steven Mnuchin appeared to suggest they may be getting ready to pull that trigger. Listen here.
The National Security Team met yesterday in the Situation Room. We'll be meeting again this morning. I think you know this is an evolving situation. We're monitoring the situation carefully. As I said, the sanctions are ready to go. We'll be updating the president this morning, and when he makes the decision, we'll act on it.
Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham is meeting with the president this afternoon to talk about possible coordination with congressional sanctions against Turkey. Graham saying that he met with Erdogan at the United Nations in September about creating safe zones. They came to an agreement, and then that Erdogan basically lied to him. Listen here.
It's quickly deteriorating inside of Syria. I blame Turkey. There's going to be crippling sanctions imposed by the Congress to supplement what President Trump's administration has done. We're going to send a signal to Turkey that's unmistakable in the eyes of Erdogan and the world, and we're going to break his economy until he stops the bloodshed.
We appear to be at a critical point in this conflict, with Turkey escalating its operations and now the Kurds inviting Syrian forces in to help defend against Turkey. This thing could get out of control pretty quickly. Bill?
Thank you, John Roberts from the White House. Thank you. That.
All right.
Sandra.
For more on all this, we've got reaction. We're going to have reaction from Florida Congressman Michael Waltz coming up, a former Green Beret and member of the House Armed Services Committee. So stay tuned for that. Now to Capitol Hill, where former Trump-Russia advisor Fiona Hill has been talking to lawmakers behind closed doors on the investigation over the Ukraine matter. That interview is happening right now. It's in hour 2, at least at this point, and we are getting some word out of that room. Let's bring in Washington Examiner editor-in-chief Hugo Gurdon. Hugo, good morning to you. When I talk about a dispute, I first saw this reported by Byron York at the Washington Examiner, and then our own Capitol Hill producer, Chad Pergram, is now telling us that there was a dispute ongoing behind closed doors in this transcribed interview with Fiona Hill. The 3 committees running the investigation, of which Matt Gaetz is not. He walked into the room, we are learning. He showed up uninvited and said that he wanted to sit down in the interview. He does sit on the Judiciary Committee, Hugo. Matt Gaetz has stepped out of that room, and he said he was kicked out of the room. That's the last we heard. What do you know, and what are you hearing, Hugo?
Well, look, Matt Gaetz is a firebrand. He's not afraid to say what's on his mind. And one of the things that's on his mind, as it is on many other people's mind, is that this is a very strange impeachment inquiry, not just because it's being done behind closed doors and and no one can reveal anything about it. But normally, impeachment is conducted by the Judiciary Committee. A lot of your viewers will remember that it was the Judiciary Committee that conducted the impeachment of Bill Clinton when that happened. This is being done by the Intel Committee in principle, and that is giving some kind of excuse for keeping things more tightly under wraps. But a lot of this information is not classified. Indeed, I'm not aware of classified information that's being spoken about in there. So, you know, I think that Matt Gaetz is saying something which is on a lot of people's minds, and that is, wait a minute, you're conducting an impeachment inquiry to remove the President of the United States, who was elected in 2016, but the public and the people's representatives are not allowed to see it? That doesn't fly.
You have had a lot of the Wall Street Journal editorial page writing about the secrecy of this ongoing investigation. Just a bit more of the reporting of Matt Gaetz walking into that meeting. Obviously, this is House Intel that is leading the inquiry there. And House Judiciary, he made the case that he was kicked out because he's obviously not a member of House Intel. But he said prior precedent, and he spoke to reporters for 2 minutes when he walked out of the room, prior precedent should give him the ability to listen to this testimony. Hugo, what does this development here this morning tell you about the direction in which all of this is going and Democrats leading of it?
Well, I think that what it tells you is that there's increasing frustration on the part of the Republicans and increasing confidence that their message is getting across, that this impeachment inquiry is being conducted, if not necessarily in a nefarious way, then in certainly one which raises eyebrows. You know, as I was saying before, you know, you cannot remove the elected president who was put in by voters in secrecy. And, you know, one of the things that the Democrats are doing is trying to make it increasingly secret. There's talk about the whistleblower not testifying in person, but in writing. There's talks about, you know, members of the White House, if they don't cooperate, despite the fact that there hasn't been a House vote for an impeachment inquiry, if they don't cooperate, they get hauled off, etc. So the two sides are ramping up and clashing ever more hostilely.
And Jim Jordan and some other Republicans, Mark Meadows and others, they stepped up to the microphone, I should say Lee Zeldin, among some others, stepped up to a microphone before that meeting began this morning, fired up. Jim Jordan said this on the stampede toward impeachment.
Chairman Schiff subpoenaed Dr. Hill. She was going to come. She'd agreed to come. She was going to come voluntarily. But he's going to subpoena her, I believe, so he can ask certain questions and, again, keep those secret, except for the certain things that he wants to leak, the cherry-picked information that he wants to leak to the American people.
That was their take this morning. Meanwhile, the president is warning Democrats that they will lose House seats over impeachment. Hugo, final thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, it wasn't the loud resistance, the impeach or bust people who gave Pelosi the majority in the 2018 congressional midterms. It was centrists in places that Trump won in 2016, places like Kansas, Wisconsin, the rural parts of Illinois and Pennsylvania. She's always known that there's a danger in impeachment that it will turn voters off and that those voters will then return a Republican majority. So there's always been this tension between those who want to impeach and those who simply want to tarnish President Trump and defeat him in the next election. So I think President Trump is probably right that there will be voters who are turned off by this.
Hugo Gurdon, Washington Examiner, editor-in-chief. Appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
Sandra.
you.
So Elizabeth Warren escalating her feud with Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, how her presidential campaign is taking aim at that company's new ad policy in a moment.
Plus, Senator Bernie Sanders taking jabs at his most progressive 2020 rival ahead of tomorrow's big debate. What he says is a key difference between himself and Senator Elizabeth Warren.
In a Fox News alert now, we're about to get an update there in New Orleans on that deadly partial collapse of a hotel that was under construction. Happened over the weekend on Saturday afternoon. One person listed as missing. We will bring you those updates as soon as they answer those questions at the microphone screen left. Back in a moment.
Our goal here is to continue to make the scene safe so we can continue getting into this building deeper and deeper for rescue purposes.
Great news for my fellow veterans. VA mortgage rates have dropped to near record lows.
Got some cameras that captured the demolition of 4 landmark cooling towers. Check this out. And down they went, huh? Like Frasier. Down goes Frasier. Happened in West Yorkshire, England. Explosion lasted about 45 seconds. They stood at a coal-fired power station for 50 years until the company decided to undergo a transition to low-carbon energy. Neighbors calling the event the end of an era. And that it is from England.
Elizabeth, I think, as you know, has said that she is a capitalist through her bones. I'm not. I am, I believe, the only candidate who's going to say to the ruling class of this country, the corporate elite, enough with your greed and with your corruption.
Senator Bernie Sanders trying to differentiate himself from Senator Elizabeth Warren as he prepares to join the candidate who has been rising in the polls along with the rest of the field for that critical debate happening tomorrow night. Joining us now is Governor John Sununu, former Governor John Sununu, and former White House Chief of Staff to President George H.W. Bush. Good morning to you, Governor. Great to have you here this morning.
Sandra.
So
How are you?
what did you make of Bernie Sanders' strategy there to sort of differentiate himself as they head into the debate?
Well, he's throwing back at Elizabeth Warren, her own quote that she's a capitalist to the bone. But of course, her statement of being a capitalist to the bone is about as true as her statements about her genealogy and her family background, or as true as her latest little fib about having been fired for being pregnant. I think what Bernie and she are doing at this point is defining the direction they're going to take for the next 4 months as they get into the voting. She's going to go after the Biden voters, and he's going to go after the extreme left-wing, socialist wing of the Democratic Party.
Well, do you think that he'll effectively differentiate himself? I mean, she has been gaining some momentum in the polls, and Bernie Sanders needs to set himself apart. How otherwise does he do that?
No, I think he's on his most likely track. I'm not sure he's got enough left in the tank to take it all the way, and I think once again he's going to be disappointed. I think right now it's a battle between Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden, and she, I think, has made the same decision.
It's very interesting. It's going to be something to watch. And she stands by that she is a capitalist and differentiates herself from those that are self-proclaimed socialists like Bernie Sanders. And she stands by that story, by the way, as well, about losing her job. Meanwhile, she seems to be taking on Facebook in this disinformation campaign. This is the breaking news. Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook just endorsed Donald Trump for re-election. This is the false ad post, Elizabeth Warren's false ad post. You're probably shocked and you might be thinking, how could this possibly be true? Well, it's not, sorry. But what Zuckerberg has done is given Donald Trump free rein to lie on his platform and then to pay Facebook gobs of money to push out their lies to American voters. What do you think of this strategy here, Governor?
Well, first of all, you have to put it in the overall context. Even though she claims she's a capitalist, she's been attacking boards. She's been attacking the capitalist principles. She has a legislative agenda laid out that is anti-capitalist, pro-socialist. So this is just another slice in that. I think she's decided she needs a definable target. I am actually a bit surprised she picked Facebook, but she has picked Facebook. The interesting thing to me is that in the story that the New York Times put online about her effort is that the New York Times claims in there that Joe Biden did not hold back $1 billion urging the firing of that prosecutor. So all of a sudden, she and the Times and others on the left are trying to undo, if you will, that videotape of Joe Biden claiming success in getting the prosecutor fired.
I mean,
the whole thing is an interesting web that they're trying to weave.
She essentially dared Facebook with that post, and Facebook did respond to it, saying, looks like broadcast stations across the country have aired this ad nearly 1,000 times, as required by law. FCC doesn't want broadcast companies censoring candidates' speech. We agree it's better to let voters, not companies, decide. Hashtag FCC. She did fire back at that Facebook tweet. I don't know where this goes. I don't know if this is a good strategy for her, but she's certainly getting attention with it ahead of the big debate. What are your expectations overall as the candidates try to make a move here? Final thoughts, Governor.
Well, there's certainly no question that what we see on television from them is a definition of their positions. But this campaign is going to be fought extremely aggressively on social media, and I think she's just trying to lay a foundation for a longer range strategy, which I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm sure it's the initial step in a longer range social media strategy.
All right. Well, it'll be a big moment this week and potentially change things. Governor, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Nice to see you, Governor. This scene is too close for comfort on the side of a highway. An out-of-control car heading for a sheriff's deputy. More on how this went down in a moment.
And the New Orleans Saints with a big win against Jacksonville. So, did a tweet from the Pope provide some divine intervention? We'll explain.
I say a little prayer for you. Forever, forever, you stay in my heart and I.
On the inquiry, as the impeachment push becomes more complex, get the insight you need. Lara Trump breaks down the latest next Fox News at Night.
Welcome to the place where people go to learn about their Medicare options before they're on Medicare.
Come on in. You're turning 65 soon? Yeah. And you're retiring at 67?
That's the plan. It's also a great time to learn about an AARP Medicare Supplement Insurance Plan insured by United Healthcare Insurance Company. Here's why. Medicare Part B doesn't pay for everything.
This part is up to you.
A Medicare Supplement Plan helps pay for some of what Medicare doesn't. Call United Healthcare Insurance Company today to request this free decision.
It's caught on camera in Wyoming when a car nearly hit several people, including a sheriff's deputy. Dash cam footage from the deputy's car showing the driver of a passing car hits some black ice and spins out of control last Friday. You can see the deputy and several others involved in a traffic stop jump out of the way. Remarkably, no one was hurt. Thank goodness for that.
Indeed. From New Orleans right now, getting a bit of an update on a building collapse in New Orleans. Happened over the weekend. They say crews are still searching this hour for one worker listed as missing. This is the Hard Rock Hotel. It was under construction. 2 people are dead. There were dozens said to be injured when portions of the upper floors of the building crashed onto the street. Jonathan Seri picks up the story now from there. Jonathan.
Hey, Bill, that news conference unfolding as we speak. The latest out of that conference is that officials are treating this as a rescue mission as they look for at least one worker still presumed trapped inside all of the rubble. Family members have identified him as 49-year-old Tony Magretta. They say he was working at the Hard Rock Hotel site Saturday morning when a portion of the building collapsed. Family members are holding out hope that he is still alive somewhere inside. First responders are having to move cautiously because the building is still unstable.
Our goal here is to continue to make the scene safe so we can continue getting into this building deeper and deeper for rescue purposes.
Amateur video taken from a New Orleans trolley captured the moment Saturday morning when portions of multiple floors of the hotel construction site came crashing down. More than 100 workers were inside. City officials say at least 30 were injured. Most have been treated and released, but there were fatalities.
We do have confirmed that 2 have passed on, but they're still a priority. Their bodies matter. And so as we make sure that we focus on safety and rescue, that will always be at the top, of our minds. So they're people.
OSHA is on site investigating. It's still unclear what led the building to collapse. Hard Rock International, the future manager of the hotel, says a separate corporate owner and contractor were overseeing the building project. The company explains in a statement Hard Rock has had no involvement in the construction of the project. We want to extend our deepest sympathies to victims of this tragic accident and to their loved ones and friends. And Bill, right now, city officials in New Orleans are urging people who work downtown or who are visiting downtown to avoid the roads there. Some major thoroughfares surrounding this construction site have been closed for safety reasons, and they want to avoid traffic bottlenecks as we go into this work week. Bill?
A lot of questions to be answered still. Thank you, sir. Jonathan Sari in our bureau there in Atlanta. Thank you.
We're going to send a signal to Turkey that's unmistakable in the eyes of Erdogan and the world, and we're going to break his economy until he stops the bloodshed.
Washington stands ready to take action against Turkey as Turkish forces ramp up attacks across its border with Syria. Florida Congressman Michael Waltz will weigh in on that.
Looking forward to hearing his thoughts on this. Also, a powerful typhoon leaving death and destruction. A massive search for the missing is on, and we'll have a live report on what happened here coming up.
Through the cloud, all over the world.
The business model is completely different.
Yes, it is.
How are we going to handle all this?
We aren't. The most important thing to do is to tell Erdogan to stop this invasion, stop the killing. We're going to put our no-fly zone in place. We're going to take control of the airspace again and shut this killing down right away. Erdogan doesn't want any part of dealing with the United States militarily. I mean, I think this is what we should have done at the outset, to be frank about it. But we are where we are right now.
It was General Jack Keane on our 9 a.m. hour today. The U.S. keeping a close eye on Turkey. Possible sanctions on the way. All this as Kurdish forces strike a deal with the Syrian government to help them defend against the Turks. Florida Congressman Michael Waltz, member of the House Armed Services Committee. Sir, how you doing? Good morning to you. And curious to get your take on this as of today. Go ahead and start. Where do you think we are, sir?
Well, I've been in conversations with a number of Green Berets out on the ground. I'm a Green Beret by background. We specialize in embedding with these local forces, and they are completely demoralized as they abandon their partners that we've been fighting against ISIS for the last 5 years. So my question is, if Assad and the Syrian army, if the Russians and if the Kurds are all now fighting this Turkish invasion, who's fighting ISIS? I can tell you our special forces over there that are now retreating are not going after the remaining ISIS leaders, nor are the Kurds, their jailers. Al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, is still alive. He's calling on his sleeper cells to rise up and attack these ISIS prison camps. A number of their key leaders have already escaped. And Bill, we've set the conditions for ISIS 2.0, except, and we're repeating the mistakes of the Obama administration, which pulled out of Iraq too soon and led to all of this in the first place, except we won't have any local allies to fight them again. So I am incredibly concerned and disheartened, and I agree with General Keane in calling on the president to put his foot down with the Turks. I am joining my colleague Liz Cheney and Lindsey Graham in putting a sanctions package forward as quickly as we can. That's the main tool that we have in the Congress. But for all of the endless war kind of crowd and voices that are whispering in the president's ear, this is how you create war. Those few hundred American special operators, not tens of thousands, a few hundred, had effectively kept a lid on this tinderbox. And now Erdogan has put a grenade in Pandora's box, and it's blowing wide open.
A couple things to get at here. Do we know that the ISIS leadership has escaped? Because the reporting from late last night was that women and children were able to leave a refugee holding area. Do we know that leaders are on the run?
There are a number of reports, and again, mine is kind of anecdotal as well, but talking to people out in the field, that this has all unfolded so quickly that a number of not only ISIS leaders have escaped, but also the searches for them, the ongoing operations, have halted. Keep in mind, in the meantime, you have Iran lurking in the background, and they are amassing not only on Israel's Syrian border, but also aiding its allies Hezbollah on the Lebanese border. I was just out there.
I agree.
I was just out there in August, and that's a tinderbox as well.
It's a wicked brew, isn't it? It's a wicked brew in this part of the world. You mentioned Liz Cheney. Here's her warning from earlier today. Liz Cheney.
We cannot have a situation where ISIS is resurgent. That's the bottom line. And the Kurds obviously have been a tremendous ally for us. If we abandon them in this way, it'll be very difficult to establish alliances in the future, and we need those to avoid having to deploy massive numbers of U.S. forces on the ground.
Go with that, then. That's pretty much the same thing you're saying, Michael. What was the better way? What was the better way to do this?
Well, the better way, we had a security mechanism, what was called a security mechanism in place, where we were conducting joint patrols with the Turks. We had convinced the Kurds to abandon and dismantle some of their defensive positions, all based on trust that the United States would continue to lead. I agree with the president in that the Europeans are not doing nearly enough to help, but the United States has to lead, and when we create a vacuum, bad actors and bad things happen and fill the void. And again, to these isolationists that are kind of pounding the table, these are a few hundred troops that were aimed to prevent war. If our goal is to bring a few hundred troops home, well, we still have 50,000 in Japan, 30,000 in South Korea, thousands in Europe, and heck, we still have a battalion in the Sinai.
Yeah, I understand the point you're making.
There's a lot more dangerous there's a lot less dangerous places to bring troops home than keeping our foot on ISIS's neck in the Middle East.
One last thing here. If you go with sanctions on Turkey, does Erdogan listen to that, or is the damage already done?
I think a lot of damage is already done, but in the longer run, hopefully we can contain the damage. This sanctions package will go after his senior leadership, will prevent people from doing business with the military, will actually go after his energy sector. So it's going to bite, but it's going to take some time to have effect, and I'm afraid enough damage will be done before this can fully bite.
Michael Waltz, military veteran from the state of Florida, back there in Washington. Sir, thank you. We'll talk later in the week.
Thanks,
sir.
Bill.
Meanwhile, massive rescue efforts underway in Japan after a powerful typhoon tore through parts of the country in and around Tokyo Saturday. The storm causing widespread flooding and landslides. Dozens are confirmed dead, with at least 17 still missing. Benjamin Hall has the latest from London for us this morning. Benjamin?
Yeah, hi, Sandra. And in fact, all of those numbers are now rising. We're hearing at least 60 dead, as many as 24 still missing. That number in particular set to rise, 150 seriously injured. And people are now calling this the worst storm to hit Japan in decades. Everyone now shifting onto a rescue footing, trying to clear up and assess the damage. The extent of destruction across the country is immense. It stretches right across the country, and it's affected around 90,000 square miles. The storm, which made landfall in the Tokyo area late on Saturday, dumped a record amount of rain, about 1 meter in 48 hours, and that caused many rivers to overflow their banks. And now there is a serious threat of mudslides which could engulf whole communities. Japan has deployed more than 110,000 rescue workers, police officers, firefighters, soldiers and Coast Guard personnel spreading out across the country, as well as 100 helicopters in the skies overhead. They've all been mobilized for the rescue effort ahead. At the peak of Typhoon Hagibis, more than 7 million people were urged to leave their homes. The typhoon battered 8 of the prefectures across Japan with wind speeds of up to 140 miles an hour. At one point, 262,000 households were without power, with 120,000 experiencing water outages. But the capital city, Tokyo, itself, which took a direct hit, survived pretty much unscathed, and that is testament to Tokyo's extraordinary flood control system. It is an elaborate underground system of pipes big enough to fit an airliner through, and it cost billions of dollars to build. Japan probably has one of the best flood defenses in all of Asia, if not in the world. It was built to withstand a flood and a storm of 100 years. But outside of Tokyo, the rural areas are not protected, and we're seeing real damage hit there. And as I said, severe risk that communities will be engulfed, weeks, if not months, to get some of them back on their feet. Sandra?
Benjamin Hall, thank you.
Oh, yeah, here we go. On the field, Jacksonville Jaguars falling yesterday to the New Orleans Saints. All seemed to start with a tweet from the Pope.
Did you see this?
Pope Francis tweets this. Today we give thanks to the Lord for our new hashtag Saints. They walk by faith, and now we invoke their intercession. That was for 5 new saints canonized in the church, but the hashtag brought up the Saints logo. And the Saints Twitter account of New Orleans retweeting that comment saying, couldn't lose after this, hashtag blessed and highly favored. Indeed they were. Saints would go on to beat Jacksonville 13-6 the final. They are now 5-1 on the season.
I mean, do you
Something
think
to that?
Yeah, do you think so?
I think it's a good chance.
Why not?
What I thought for a long time is that the Pontiff was a Bengal fan. And that was the only thing that was giving me hope during this otherwise lost season of 0-5 the current moment.
Well, congrats to the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, apparently he's not a fan of the Stripes in Cincinnati. Anyway, here we go. Bless Father. Yeah.
There you go. All right, Hunter Biden, meanwhile, making a big decision involving his spot on the board of a Chinese company. Meanwhile, his father is firing back at his critics.
Also, former Trump Russia advisor Fiona Hill right now behind closed doors. How many hours will this go today? And what will she say? Former Deputy Assistant Attorney Tom Dupree will weigh in on that. He's coming up next. Here's Ken Starr from last hour.
I know they have the raw power to do exactly what they're doing, but they don't have the moral right to do what they're doing. What they're doing is constitutionally wrong. It is a raw power play that appears to be unprecedented in American history.
Shrimp, yeah. Red Lobster's Endless Shrimp is back for just $15.99. Get all the shrimp you want, any way you want them. Like new Sriracha Honey Shrimp, savory grilled teriyaki shrimp, classic shrimp scampi, and
Signed a bill stating that beginning in 2022, so 3 years now, public middle schools must start no earlier than 8 a.m. Public high schools cannot start any earlier than 8:30 a.m. California, the first state to make later school start times a law.
Sounds good at first, but then
you like that?
do you go to bed later? Does it actually help? You know, do you keep the same bedtime? I mean, I think they want kids to be able to get more sleep.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I always
Do you
think
have
about
thoughts, Howard?
how it applies to us, right? So, I mean, if they wanted to, we may start our show later. And then you and I sleep in later.
How did you get to that?
I'm not sure.
I don't-
Because I don't think it's going to fly, right? Because there's.
Best of those kids. Hopefully it works out.
Yeah. Congratulations, California.
Our primary interest right now is making sure that that person is protected. Indeed, now there's more than one whistleblower that they are protected. And given that we already have the call record, we don't need the whistleblower who wasn't on the call to tell us what took place during the call.
That was Democratic Chair of the House Intel Committee, Adam Schiff, as he and several other House lawmakers are questioning President Trump's former top Russia advisor behind closed doors, Fiona Hill, in their impeachment inquiry. Joining us now is Tom Dupree, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under George W. Bush. Tom, good morning to you. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Sandra.
First off, she agreed to voluntarily appear and ask questions behind closed doors from lawmakers. But then Adam Schiff subpoenaed her, and she's in that room now. But if she said she was willing to come without a subpoena, why subpoena her?
Yeah, it's a great question, Sandra. I mean, a lot of times Congress will do this, is what lawyers like to call belt and suspenders, to basically protect themselves in case she just changes her mind. So this way they're ensured of getting her testimony. And look, I think it's going to be pretty interesting. From what we understand, she had expressed unhappiness at her role and the fact that, from her perspective at least, Rudy Giuliani and others were essentially circumventing her role in our dealings with Russia and Ukraine.
What will she say?
Yeah, well, I think she's going to be unhappy. I think she is going to say, I would anticipate that she would say that, look, there's a process in the White House for dealing with foreign policy and for exercising the president's foreign policy, and that there were people connected with the administration who weren't acting through the normal channels. I mean, if there's one thing we've seen over the years, it's that this White House often likes to operate in a somewhat unorthodox style, and I suspect it didn't sit very well with her.
We talked to Ken Starr this morning, and he had some pretty strong thoughts about what is happening on Capitol Hill. Here's Ken Starr.
The House is given the sole power to impeach, not a committee and not the Speaker. And I think this is something that every American should be concerned about, that the Speaker is not calling for a vote, but it's not just a vote, it's a debate on whether there should be impeachment.
What about that? All of this continues, and again, this questioning happening behind closed doors on Capitol Hill in secret this morning. What about that? There's still no vote.
Yeah. Well, there is no vote, and it is perplexing. I think Judge Starr is right in that if you look at the Constitution, the text of it doesn't require a vote. But you look at the way that past impeachments have been conducted. You also look at just the way that impeachment generally works. In other words, the framers said you need to have a majority in the House, you need to have a supermajority in the Senate in order to impeach and remove a president. And the reason they did that is because the framers didn't want impeachment to be run by a single person or a narrow band of ideologues or a faction. They wanted something approaching consensus before Congress moves ahead with what unquestionably is a momentous decision.
Meanwhile, we are getting some word about what happened behind closed doors this morning. Apparently, Matt Gaetz, the congressman, entered the room where he is a member of the Judiciary Committee, but Judiciary is not there asking questions or even in the room. He was demanding that he be allowed in the room. Adam Schiff said this is intel only, and he was asked to leave. He stepped outside, talked to reporters for a couple minutes. Here's Matt Gaetz.
In the absence of any rules that House Democrats have adopted, I found it only reasonable to look at prior precedent on impeachment. And in the impeachment matters that I've reviewed, there's a lot of involvement from the House Judiciary Committee. The House Judiciary Committee began the impeachment inquiry, according to Chairman Nadler, and now his own members on the Judiciary Committee aren't allowed to participate. So that came as a shock to me.
So he walked out of the room, answered questions there. Should Matt Gaetz, should members of House Judiciary be allowed in that room as well?
Well, I think all members of the House should be ultimately allowed to the information that's being developed in the course of this impeachment inquiry. I mean, the whole point of having these hearings and eliciting this information is to enable and empower members of the House of Representatives to cast an informed decision as to whether to impeach the President of the United States. And the risk you run when you have hearings that are segregated or that are limited to particular congressmen who are allowed in and who aren't allowed in is that the information isn't shared throughout the collective House as a whole, and therefore you're going to have members who simply don't have access to the same information that many of their colleagues do.
Yeah, and that was as the meeting had begun. Before the meeting even started, Republicans had taken to the microphone, including Lee Zeldin from New York, and said, continued to question the process that we are observing here. And he went on to call the entire thing a clown show. All right, so we will see what comes from that closed-door meeting as it continues into multiple hours now. Tom Dupree, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Nice to see you, Tom. An American diplomat's wife apologizing after being involved in a car accident that killed a teenager in England. The victim's family, however, saying that is not good enough. What they're demanding in a moment. Next.
Our 18
decision, we do not know. But we shouldn't have gone through this. We shouldn't be suffering like this. It should have been an open and shut case. The evidence is extremely clear. What happened?
That's the family of a British teenager died in a car accident involving an American diplomat's wife. Now sounding off, the family is. The driver, Anna Sakulis, has since apologized. But the victim's mother says, quote, sorry does not cut it. Senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palkot picks up the story. He is live in London on this. Greg.
Hey, Bill, yes, some very strong words from the parents of that killed teenager. Now they are bringing their case to the States to try to apply pressure. The mother and father of 19-year-old Harry Dunn hoping to get the woman thought responsible for the death of their son sent back to the UK to face justice. Here's a bit more of what she had to say today.
She needs to just do the right thing and just come back and face what she's done, face us as a broken family, face our UK system, and just do the right thing.
Very strong stuff, Bill. Dunn was killed riding his motorcycle in late August in central England. He was hit by a car driving on the wrong side of the road. Police say that American Ann Sekulis was at the wheel of the car. Her husband is reportedly a U.S. intelligence officer at a nearby British air base. She left the UK under diplomatic immunity. The woman says now that she is sorry and wants to meet the parents. They are refusing until she returns. The latest developments, Bill, on this is over the weekend, the UK's foreign secretary says that he feels, and he thinks the U.S. feels, that diplomatic immunity no longer applies to the American now that she is back in the States. But of course, that sets up a possible royal legal battle involving extradition and who knows what. So this could go on for a while, but it is developing, Bill.
Greg, thank you. Greg Palkot reporting live in London on that. Thanks, Greg. Nice to see you.
That big meeting continues behind closed doors on Capitol Hill at this hour. President Trump's former top Russia aide is in the hot seat. So what are House Democrats asking as they ramp up their impeachment inquiry?
priority has always been to secure the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union on the 31st of October. My government intends to work towards a new partnership with the European Union based on free trade and friendly cooperation.
That's Queen Elizabeth there outlining the UK's plan to exit from the EU in a speech to open a new session of Parliament. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is expected to put a bill before Parliament next week. However, opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn says it is a farce and it will not pass. In her speech, the Queen also called for a fair, modern, and global immigration system.
How about that? Follow that. Your Newsroom News Vault on a Monday now, Columbus Day, October 14, 1964. The Reverend Martin Luther King received the Nobel Prize for Peace for his peaceful protest against racial prejudice in America. He was the youngest person ever to receive the award at the age of 35. He helped mobilize millions to force change on racial inequality, and that was this day in 1964. Cool stuff.
Look back there.
All right.
All right. That was a Monday morning
for us.
us.
Move, huh? Yes. Onward to Tuesday.
Fantasy football.
Yeah,
we'll work on that lineup.
Do you have anything on your mind? We've got 20 seconds. You want to steal it? Go, go, go.
All good there.
What I need is your Bears defense to do well.
But if they're not.
That would be nice. Well, later, bye.
Okay. All right. That's it. Does it for us. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Outnumbered starts right now.
Fox News Alert, and we begin with President Trump's former Russia advisor Fiona Hill meeting behind closed doors with House lawmakers today for a transcribed interview as part of Democrats' impeachment probe. Now, it is unclear how much she actually knows about President Trump's call with the Ukrainian president, which happened back in July. Meanwhile, as the inquiry advances, House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff says Democrats may not need the whistleblower to testify after all.
Given that we already have the call record, we don't need the whistleblower who wasn't on the call to tell us what took place during the call. We have the best evidence. It may not be necessary to take steps that might reveal the whistleblower's identity to do that, and we're going to make sure we protect that whistleblower.
Okay, so President Trump is now firing back, saying that the whistleblower must testify and even explain why he got the details of his conversation with Ukraine so wrong. This is Outnumbered. I'm Julie Banderas, and here today, host of the Evening Edit on the Fox Business Network, Elizabeth McDonald, Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, and Jeannie Zaino, political science professor at Iona College, and joining us on the couch, the man in the middle, Guy Benson, Fox News contributor and host of the Guy Benson Show on Fox News Radio. And you are outnumbered. I hope you fare well. It's a full hour.
Me too. I'm buckling in. We'll see
yes.
how it goes.
Usually does well. Buckle up. All right, let's get right into, first of all, this person that's going to be resigning, or that resigned in July before the actual, phone call took place. I'm wondering how much her testimony is really going to matter, since she wasn't even there. She wasn't even in the White House when this phone call took place.
I mean, I don't think we know yet. They're doing it behind closed doors. I think there's been a lot of questions as to why somebody who agreed to testify was then subpoenaed to testify. And we do know that a Republican member of the House who is not on the committee tried to go in and was not allowed into the testimony. So I don't think we know. We suspect she does have a sense as to what was going on potentially with Rudy Giuliani's involvement before that phone call. But obviously she was gone by the time the phone call occurred.
Okay, so Fiona Hill, she was President Trump's former Russia advisor, Katie. She left in August, but she was essentially out in July. Yeah. And after she was out, that's when that phone call took place, about a week later. So the question is now, why is she going to be brought forth to discuss a phone call that happened after she was even there? I'm not sure what she can actually bring to the table.
She left a week before, the National Security Council, a week before this phone call even took place. And I think this is just all about Democrats trying to give this viewpoint of asking former officials to come forward, making the impression that they have something to talk about. They're holding these hearings behind closed doors because people like Adam Schiff, who is leading this charge, doesn't want Republicans to be able to have this out in the open to see what she's actually saying. They've been able to drip out selected pieces of information that go with their narrative rather than maybe the full context of the truth here. And also Adam Schiff doesn't want to bring the whistleblower forward because he doesn't want questions about the background of this person, what their affiliation with Joe Biden may have been, what their affiliation with the former National Security Council under the Obama administration may have been, and who in the White House currently told them about the phone call, because the complaint is about him getting information, he or she getting information secondhand.
I want to talk a little bit more about her and her background, just to put it into context. She was skeptical of the president's relationship even before, he took office, because she was a skeptic of Putin, and she didn't believe that the president should have relations with Putin. And the Putin, relationship with President Trump has been an interesting one, but the president has been wanting to sort of extend the olive branch to Vladimir Putin. Where do you believe she stands when it comes to, I guess, not being biased in this particular position, because she does have an opinion on the president's relationship with Russia?
Yeah, sure, and that's fine. And I'm even willing to say that I'm interested to hear what she has to say, especially if she can shed some light on Rudy Giuliani and what his role was, because that seems to be a murky piece of this strange puzzle. But I'd like to hear it from her, not through this blizzard that we get from Adam Schiff and the Democrats, where they're having all of these testimonies behind closed doors, these depositions, these interviews, and then we get the opening statement leaked out, and then nothing else. And occasionally they'll selectively put a little drib or drab that we all then munch on here collectively, without getting a broader, more fulsome picture of what happened behind closed doors. I think if we're going to go through the very serious process of impeaching a president, the American people have a right to see what's going on, who's saying what, and then weigh for ourselves if it's relevant.
It's just, is it relevant? Is her testimony relevant?
Well, it's going to be about, as Guy just said, what Rudy Giuliani was doing in the Ukraine, right? And so we know that Senator Ted Cruz is now saying, yeah, it's not right. It's inappropriate to ask, including China, to look into a political rival. China's a communist surveillance state. But I think Katie made the right point, and you said it too, is that the Dems are setting the narrative, right? They're doing it behind closed doors. They're leaking out in dribs and drabs. And yes, Article 1 says they get to set the rules of the proceedings, but this is about setting precedent for this country. Do we want this as a way to go forward where the Republicans have no place right now to cross-examine, subpoena witnesses, provide counter-arguments, and be accused of obstruction if they stand up and oppose? So really, this is about precedent for the country. Is this how we want it done going forward, where the Republicans feel railroaded out of the process right now?
Well, and transparency holds everybody accountable. It holds Rudy Giuliani accountable, it holds the president accountable, and holds Adam Schiff accountable for what he is saying publicly. Because in the past, as we've seen, the opening statements that have been provided actually contradict a lot of the narrative that is rushed out by Adam Schiff to the cameras immediately after these hearings.
Okay, speaking of transparency, meanwhile, Joe Biden's son, Hunter, finally coming out announcing that he will step down from the board of a Chinese-backed private equity firm and pledging not to work on behalf of foreign-owned companies if his father, in fact, becomes president. This comes as President Trump has stepped up scrutiny over Biden's business dealings. Now, the White House is reacting to the news. This was yesterday. Watch.
He should have done this quite a while ago. In fact, he probably shouldn't have been on the board to begin with. And I am really disappointed in so many members of the mainstream media stretching their necks to defend Hunter Biden, saying, and we must say that there's no wrongdoing here, nothing illegal. Folks, this is what people hate about the swamp. This is part of how Donald Trump won in the first place.
Okay, so now this is the question. I mean, you're nodding your head. When we talk about transparency, I'm wondering why now? We're just now hearing from Hunter Biden.
Because of politics, right? This was the Biden campaign forced into a corner, and it's another unforced error by them. It has been astonishing to me how poorly the Biden campaign has treated this entire process on this particular issue.
Right.
They knew going into this presidential run, or they certainly should have known, that Hunter Biden and his business dealings overseas, it was going to be an issue that rival campaigns were going to bring up, including the incumbent and the Trump campaign. The fact that they have been floundering and flopping all over the place with a terrible sort of ham-fisted response from Joe Biden. He's given no interviews himself about this subject. He's lashing out at the media, saying various media entities shouldn't book guests or shouldn't treat this as a serious issue. Now, at the last minute, finally, Hunter Biden is saying, okay, I'm going to disentangle myself from all of this. It's almost too little too late is how it feels. And it kind of also feels like an admission that there was something wrong with doing it in the first place.
Well, that's what I wanted to
Biden
ask
said there was nothing
you.
wrong.
Because if he's saying that he is going to step down, why is he stepping down? Clearly, there must have been a conflict of interest somewhere. That's number one. Number two, I want to ask you about this, is that he was working for this Ukrainian company where he was said to make $50,000 a year, and that he could have a month. I meant a month.
That's
sorry.
right.
And he's now saying that he hasn't earned a dime. How are we to believe that?
I know.
Who works for free?
And you know what, Guy, you're absolutely right. We should be allowed to ask all the questions. By the way, he's not going to divest his stake in that Chinese private equity fund, right? Which de minimis is like $420,000. It's not a big fund.
Which he has not,
but,
he says, yet to see a dime of that.
It's also raising issues about the Trump family's business dealings overseas as well. But, you know, for Joe Biden to say you're not allowed to ask questions and don't book guests, I mean, really? Biden Incorporated has been an issue for decades. It's not just his son, it's also Joe Biden's brother as well. His business dealings have been called into question. So the fact that Hunter Biden won't divest, and he will only like move away from foreign business dealings if his father becomes president, there's a lot of caveats here.
I do
it feels like
think
there's a bunch
we
of
have
caveats.
to be very clear, though. There is no allegation against either Joe or Hunter Biden that they did anything illegal or wrong. And also, to your point, you do have to and you do have to look then at other politicians and their sons.
We'll have more time to talk more about this. We do have to get to a news conference right now. It's underway in Fort Worth, Texas, with the attorney for the family of a Texas woman shot and killed by a local police officer there. Let's watch.
7 officer-involved deaths. That's more than most nations for a single city in Texas. It represents a serious problem that must be addressed. So, of course, this family is calling for the firing of this officer. That's benign. That's the least we should expect. They're calling for this officer to be vigorously prosecuted, to be appropriately sentenced. That prosecution, the investigation, should be handled by someone other than the Fort Worth Police Department, specifically the Department of Justice, the FBI, or worst case scenario, the local sheriff's department. Anyone other than the city of Fort Worth who is clearly incompetent to investigate itself should be called in. We expect this to happen immediately. This happened Saturday. Why this man is not in handcuffs right now is a source of continued agitation for this family and for this community, and it must be addressed. In a moment, you'll hear from Corey Hughes, who is an activist and a member of the Fort Worth community, and then you'll hear directly from the family of Ted Jefferson. Sure.
Just for the correct spelling of my name, it is C-O-R-Y, last name Hughes, H-U-G-H-E-S. The reality is I've had the unfortunate responsibility of sitting in front of these cameras and sitting next to families that have lost loved ones by the hands of police officers all too often. As a member of the community of Fort Worth, as someone that has taken the responsibility to be a voice for my community, I want to set the record straight that we're not looking for a 30-day suspension. We're not looking for a slap on the wrist. We're not looking for what seems to be status quo, is that the people that we hire to serve and protect us, when one of their own violates the community, it seems like they do more of trying to serve and protect their own. So what we're looking for is for this officer not only to be fired, but we're demanding that this officer be charged as well, like the criminal that he is. It's a sad commentary in this day and age that someone could be sitting in their home playing a video game with a family member and not be safe. That when someone calls the police for a wellness check, that instead of them checking on how well she is, days later we're here talking about the fact that an officer took her life. It's unacceptable. We're demanding justice. We're demanding that the mayor and the city officials don't sweep this under the rug. We're not going to allow you to. This life mattered. This life mattered. This family matters. And we're demanding justice, and we're not going to wait. We demand justice now. Thank you.
All right, the next person that you hear from is going to be the brother of Tatiana Jefferson, and I'll allow him to introduce himself.
My name is Darius Carr. I am currently stationed in San Diego. I served my country for the last 12 years. In that time, I've been trained and taught. There are pre-planned responses to everything you do. Everything you're trained about, there's a way to do things. And when you don't do it the way you've been trained, or the way you've been taught, you have to answer for that. You have been trained. You know better, so you have to answer for that. Not in your command, not in your department. Someone comes in and investigates the whole incident. Fort Worth PD cannot investigate themselves. U.S. Navy is allowed to do it. They should not be well. This man murdered someone. He should be arrested.
And we want to continue to echo the calls and be clear that this family is standing in solidarity, that Fort Worth needs to recuse itself from this investigation. And they need to bring in an outside agency. And they need to make sure this officer is treated like any other criminal suspect in our criminal justice system. The next person that you're going to hear from is the sister of the sister of Tay, and her name is Amber.
I'm Amber Carr.
And I'm actually screwed up just a little bit, I'm sorry.
Okay. Amber Carr, I'm one of her older sisters. We're 11 months apart. We grew up together. The last time I spoke to my sister was last Saturday. She came to the hospital in Plano where I was recovering from a major heart surgery. She came, brought me food. She brought me a new cell phone. She talked about how this weekend actually was the weekend that she and my older sister were planning to take the boys to the fair, and asked me what did I want back, considering she knew I wasn't going to be able to walk the fair park. My sister, the relationship she has with my sons is undescribable. Sometimes people think that they're her kids and not mine. She helped Zion every day to get ready for school because my mother wasn't capable of doing it. She wrote out a schedule so that he could be organized. She helped him understand that he had to be responsible for putting on his clothes, picking out his clothes, and getting ready on time to leave for the day. Those were things that my mom did for him. So she helped him become more independent and self-sufficient. My son, who was there to witness the event, you would think that, he would show some type of sadness or emotions, but the first time I actually got to see him and pick him up from a facility for children, the first thing he told me was he was sad. And I asked him, why was he sad? And he told me because the police had shot his aunt. And at that time, I knew nothing about that. So he was the one who actually told me what happened. But at this time, he's my motivation. He's my biggest encourager. In the middle of the night when I'm crying, he wakes up and tells me to breathe in my nose and out my mouth. He holds me, he hugs me. And these are the things I should be doing for him, but he's not reacting in that manner. He's helping me to be strong. And I believe that's because my sister had a big part in that.
The next person that you're going to hear from, she's prepared a statement. I'm going to allow her to come around. Her name is Ashley Carr.
We are listening to the family and from the lawyer representing Tatiana Jefferson's family. She was fatally shot by a police officer, a member of the Fort Worth Police Department, over the weekend, and it is just a heart-wrenching story. The details are still sort of leaking out. There was a body cam on the police officer who was outside the home while Tatiana Jefferson was babysitting her 8-year-old nephew. In fact, the two were playing video games. And as it seems, as the facts are starting to spill out, a neighbor had made a call to the police department, not an emergency call. It was a non-emergency call. It was a wellness call. And when they placed that call, they simply told the police department that a door was left open. That was it. The front door to a home was left open, the lights were on. So the police were simply going to check on the home. Somehow, that led to a police officer opening fire through a window, shooting and killing Tatiana Jefferson right in front of her 8-year-old nephew. That is all we know now. An investigation continues. The family, the lawyer, they want to see this justice served and this police officer fired and charged with criminal activity. But the investigation continues. We'll continue to watch this heart-wrenching story. We'll be right back.
Well, the Syrian army deploying troops to the country's northern border after striking a Russia-brokered deal with the Kurds to help them fend off Turkey's expanding military offensive. The Turks releasing this new video of airstrikes hitting Kurdish soldiers. Meantime, back in Washington, we're learning the Pentagon is accelerating plans to get all remaining U.S. troops out of Syria within the coming weeks or days. And South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham says he's meeting with President Trump today about enacting crippling sanctions against Turkey. So, Guy, what are your thoughts on the continuing fallout over the past couple of days?
Well, it's just a disaster. Every report that we've seen suggests that the Kurds, our friends, our allies, people who did a lot of our dirty work on the ground so we could have a light footprint to defeat ISIS, they are being decimated. It is very sad to see. I think if there are going to be sanctions, I support the sanctions. I think it's the least we can do at this point. But it's also, I think, just a failure of American leadership here, where now the Kurds, who have done so much for us, feel like they have no choice but to go begging to Assad and the Russians for protection. It's a survival instinct from there. I can't blame them, but I think it's a shame in every sense of that word that they were forced to do so.
So, Liz, it seems like the administration is trying to come up with a solution to the fallout to try and stop Turkey, which is going further now than they said they initially were going to, with economic sanctions. The Turkish currency has fallen in the last 24 hours as a result of Congress and the president talking about this. You're on the Business Channel. What would it mean for Turkey's economy if these sanctions were to get pushed through?
Turkey had a problem with its currency within the past couple of years, ricocheting around and being devalued. So you're right, that is an issue for Turkey. Right now, Turkey likely faces Russia, Syria, Iran, the United States, and the European Union. So you wonder what Turkey's position will be now. Will it accept a no-fly zone, a safe haven? There's a lot of critics saying, yeah, it's just horrifying that our Kurdish allies are being attacked and decimated as they are. And we know that ISIS prisoners are now 785 out of, there are 12,000 ISIS jihadis apparently in the region. That's also an issue too. Do they have fake U.S. passports? Will they stay in the northeastern part of the country and wreak havoc? Will now Turkey face incursions from ISIS and other rebels as well?
Yeah. Your thoughts?
You know, I think one thing this really does underscore is that for those people who think that the president he's not committed to an ideology, he absolutely is. He has been committed from the time of the election to make America great, bring those soldiers home, non-interventionism. Unfortunately, to your point, you create a power vacuum, and one lesson is you can't make foreign policy the way you wish to make it. You have to make it based on the circumstances. We have left a valuable, a real close ally over there, incredibly vulnerable, and Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, they are going to move in on that.
And speaking of Saudi, if the touchdown is bring our people home, which is very appealing to a lot of
then
Americans,
why send troops?
1,800 new troops to Saudi Arabia.
I mean, just the fact that the Syrian people are now victim to Assad's regime is really disconcerting. It's a travesty, quite frankly. I mean, they are not going to have protection. And to listen to Russia and Turkey is also sort of giving in to the evil. The lesser of two evils, which is, I'm not really quite sure.
So, Guy, the ISIS fighters now, a number of them have escaped. The president is saying it will be easy to go back and get them. But to his credit, the Europeans didn't step up here to take back or deal with this ISIS problem, which is a lot of the reason why we're in the situation we are right now. And now Angela Merkel of Germany is finally telling Turkey that maybe they should back off.
With an angry phone call.
Yeah, don't the Europeans also have a lot of responsibility here for the current situation?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the best points Trump has made. This will impact Europe more immediately than it will the United States, but it's still really bad. And, I think that some people may be misjudging the politics of this. Trump may have more support than a lot of the commentariat would suggest. However, if ISIS reconstitutes, the first Westerner that they take and behead, God forbid, that's going to be not just a humanitarian problem, it's going to be a political problem too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Joe Biden taking credit for the impeachment push against President Trump, why he's saying it, and whether he should be careful what he wishes for.
I may be the last guy to publicly call for impeachment, but I'm the only reason there is impeachment going on. Because this president has, I've written extensively about how this president, our democracy is literally at stake. It's not a joke. This is the most corrupt administration in modern American history.
He says it's all because of him. Joe Biden taking all the credit for the Trump impeachment inquiry, telling an audience in Iowa that if the president hadn't asked Ukraine to investigate him and his son, none of this would be happening. Okay, first of all, the phone call, yes, did involve the fact that the president, Katie, wanted the Bidens investigated. But the impeachment hearings, last I checked, he's not on Congress, so therefore he's not actually responsible for putting forth the inquiry. Am I wrong?
I think Joe Biden needs to have a conversation with Congressman Al Green, who introduced articles of impeachment on the House floor like 3 months after President Trump was elected. Jerry Nadler, who as soon as the House was taken over by Democrats in 2018 was vowing to impeach him. Maxine Waters has been all over television saying that she deserves credit for calling for impeachment as one of the first people. So, you know, if Joe Biden wants to use this as a way to try and, you know, get some kind of campaign leverage, then go for it. But, you know, there's a lot of other Democrats who deserve credit for it first.
I feel like I've fallen through the looking glass and I'm standing on the other side of the mirror. I'm not quite sure that this is the comeback that Joe Biden really wants right now. The media was calling for President Trump's impeachment before he was even elected. I think it started, we did it on the Evening Edit back to March 2016. Right. So even before he was elected, even before he sat in the office. But, you know, I'm not sure this is the place for, is the seat that Joe Biden wants to be sitting in right now, given that there's still questions about what was going on.
Could this hurt his campaign? I mean, is he deflecting? Because, I mean, there was an investigation that the president was in belief should be done, or, you know.
And actually, most Americans agree that there should be an investigation into the Bidens. The question is whether Trump did approached that, right, and pursued that inappropriately, which I believe that he did. Look, I understand what Biden's trying to say here. He's trying to say, I held my powder, right? I kept it dry. I didn't come out for impeachment until this huge thing. And the polls were against impeachment 20, 30 points underwater until the Ukraine matter, and Biden's at the center of that. I understand the point he's trying to make, but he's doing it badly, unsurprisingly. And if I were him or advising him, which I'm definitely not, he should be, instead of bumbling like that, he should be saying, the reason that we have impeachment right now is over this inappropriate abuse of power or whatever from President Trump about me. And why did he make that request? Not only to Ukraine, but to China, because he's scared of me, because I could beat him. But he can't stay on track, Joe Biden. The problem is the candidate.
This is why Joe Biden ran and lost twice. And this is why his campaign is frustrated, because he stumbles all the time. There's an old adage in politics. When your opponent is being hit by somebody else, you stay quiet and move forward with your campaign. Joe Biden better look behind him, or actually in front of him now, where Elizabeth Warren is coming on strong. He should not be talking about corruption surrounding himself and his son and the Ukraine and impeachment. He should stay quiet on that. If he wants to say, I support what the Democrats are doing in the House, that's enough. Move forward with your campaign. He could have a very big shock in Iowa, New Hampshire, and God forbid for him, South Carolina. Elizabeth Warren is beating him in the polls. He needs to look at her. Run the race you're running. Stop fighting about impeachment right now.
It cuts two ways on Joe Biden. The first is that Democrats running against him can say, you were only for impeachment when it got personal for you. You weren't looking out for the good of the country in terms of getting this guy who you say is abusing his power out of office. And the other thing is that Trump can go after him and say, the only reason you want impeachment is because you don't want transparency when it comes to your family's dealings with Ukraine and China. So I'm not so sure that it helps him when it comes to getting that issue off the table.
I think maybe he should pay more attention to his own family, because it's interesting how he came out and said he had no idea that Hunter Biden's lawyer was in fact going to be releasing that statement that he was stepping down. So maybe the two of them should.
But he also claimed he never talked to Hunter Biden about any of the business dealings, and now we know that's not true either.
Yes. All right. We are going to move on. Bernie Sanders attacking Elizabeth Warren as a capitalist as he tries to set himself apart from his biggest challenger on the left. Will it be enough to give him a boost in the polls?
There are differences between Elizabeth and myself. Elizabeth, I think, as you know, has said that she is a capitalist through her bones. I'm not. And the reason I am not is because I will not tolerate for 1 second the kind of greed and corruption and income and wealth inequality and so much suffering that is going on in this country.
Okay, 2020 candidate Bernie Sanders looking to contrast himself with Elizabeth Warren, the Vermont senator who is back on the campaign trail after suffering a heart attack earlier this month, is painting himself as the one true progressive in the race ahead of tomorrow's primary Democrat debate in Ohio. Katie, you know what always bothers me about Bernie Sanders' statistics? He leaves out, when he talks about income inequality, he's only talking about income. He doesn't take into account 401ks, pension plans, the Earned Income Tax Credit, Medicare, Medicaid. He leaves out all of the government support programs out of his math when he brings up income inequality. He's consistently whipping fastballs by the American people, but does say he will raise taxes on the lower income classes, including middle class.
Well, Bernie Sanders, if he believes in what he says about wealth inequality, then he's part of the problem. He's a millionaire. He says he's a socialist, but he's had the riches of capitalism at his back for years now. He has multiple homes. He has millions of dollars. He's received many book deals, and he hasn't given that money away to the poor and to solve this income inequality problem that he talks about. The interesting thing here is the politics of this when it comes to Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, because they had this peace pact before that they weren't going to criticize each other publicly. Well, that is over. And the question is going to be now moving forward is that there can only be one of them on the far left. And will Bernie supporters go for Elizabeth Warren and vice versa if they really do have different policies?
And here's the thing. Do we really think Elizabeth Warren is a capitalist? No. I mean, her accountable capitalism, it's like critics are saying she wants to put the U.S. economy locked in her teacher's faculty lounge.
So in Bernie Sanders, we have a socialist who calls himself a socialist. In Elizabeth Warren, we have a socialist who calls herself a capitalist. But there's very little daylight between the two of them when it comes to policy. They both want massive, enormous, astonishingly expensive government intrusions into our lives. And so I'm just curious, to Katie's point, this is not a surprise. They're battling it out on the far left. They've been playing nice, especially on the debate stage. Will they continue to play nice? I think it's actually in Warren's interest to keep the peace pact. Yeah. I think Bernie looks a little bit desperate here. If you look at the polling, you can probably figure out why he might be feeling that way. But she's going to keep smiling and giving a thumbs up to Bernie, I would guess, as to not alienate his supporters moving forward. But I think he might feel like he has to make a move.
What do you think, Julie?
I mean, first of all, socialists don't necessarily poll so well. So maybe he should take a look at himself instead of focusing so much on saying how much he hates capitalists and hating the rich, because he's talking about himself there. But there's a Gallup poll that basically found 51% said that it would be a bad thing for the United States. I mean, that's not something that bodes very well in the election cycle. Yeah. I mean, but obviously he's going to go after Warren. She's now leading in the polls, and that's going to be her target.
And let's look at Bernie Sanders, who's unveiling a new plan his team is calling the boldest. Well, let's talk about it. It's just tax hikes. That's what he's talking about. What's your reaction to what Bernie's proposing now, what he's talking about?
You know, it's interesting to me. Elizabeth Warren has benefited so much during this campaign from what has happened. Number one, her opponent, Biden, being charged with corruption by the president. Number two, now she's got Bernie Sanders saying that she's a capitalist. Well, what does Elizabeth Warren need to do if she can make it through the primary gauntlet? She needs to move to the center. So I'm not sure who's giving Bernie Sanders this advice, but she is beating him in the polls. I don't know if either of these guys are paying attention to these polls. She is beating both of them now in these polls, and this is benefiting her, not him.
And still dodging questions Elizabeth Warren dodging questions on whether she will raise taxes under her plans, which she probably would have to. New signs. President Trump's push to get Mexico to step up on border security may be working. Details ahead.
Orlando isn't just the theme park capital of the world. It also has the highest growth in manufacturing jobs in the U.S.
It's a competition for the talent.
Employees need more than just a paycheck. You definitely want to take advantage of all the benefits you can get.
2/3 of employees said that the workplace is an important source for personal savings and protection solutions.
The workplace should be a source of financial security.
Keeping your people happy is what keeps your people. That's financial wellness. Put your employees on a path to financial wellness with Prudential.
Is that net carbs or total? Not enough fiber. Chocolate would be good.
Snacking should be sweet and simple. The delicious taste of Glucerna gives you the sweetness you crave while helping you manage your blood sugar. Glucerna, everyday progress.
Billions of mouths, billions of problems. Dry mouth, parched mouth, cotton mouth? There's a TheraBreath for you. TheraBreath, oral rinse and lozenges, help relieve dry mouth using natural enzymes to soothe and moisturize. So you can breathe easy. There's TheraBreath at Walmart.
Hi, I'm Barry Sloan with NewTek, your business solutions company. Does your business need money? Whether you need $10,000 or $10 million, you can count on NewTek, the nation's largest non-bank government-guaranteed lender. NewTek can help your business expand and grow. With a simple phone interview, we can pre-qualify you in just 48 hours. And with rates as low as 6%, you can see why so many businesses turn to NewTek. To see how easy getting a loan can be, contact NewTek, your business solutions company, today.
Clarity on the inquiry. As the impeachment push becomes more complex, get the insight you need. Lara Trump breaks down the latest next Fox News at Night.
These folks, they don't have time to go to the post office. They have businesses to grow, customers to care for, lives to get home to. They use Stamps.com. Print discounted postage for any letter, any package, anytime, right from your computer. All the amazing services of the post office, only cheaper. Get our special TV offer. A 4-week trial plus postage and a digital scale. Go to Stamps.com/try and never go to the post office again.
Hey, I'm Major League Fishing pro Russ Lane, and I got something to admit. I do not like going to the doctor. I'm a country boy, raised where guys are supposed to be tough. You just ain't getting me in that waiting room talking about awkward guy stuff. Good thing there's a better way. Now I can get in touch with a doctor by going to 4hims.com for those manly issues. Simple, affordable, no embarrassment. And now Hims is offering free online consultations. Just go to 4hims.com.
I have a structured settlement and I need cash now. Call J.G. Wentworth.
J.G. Wentworth, how can I help you get cash?
I want to pay off my debt and move into my own place, but I need cash now to do it.
Let's see if we can help. Do you get regular payments from an insurance company? For example, from a personal injury settlement or car accident?
Yes, monthly, and it's been working out okay. The thing is, it's my money and I need it now.
Right. So how does this sound? In exchange for some or all of your future payments, we give you a lump sum of cash now. And since this isn't a personal loan, there's no credit check. What will you do with more cash? Buy a car, get an apartment, go to school? After all, it's your money. Use it when you need it. Call now and you'll also get $25 for